I want to take a moment to talk to you about Roll TV, our online video library platform. Whether you've been training for a week, a month, a year, or 5 years, you already know that you need all the tools that you can possibly get and get your hands on to continue improving your skills as you go through the Jiu-Jitsu journey. And that's what Roll TV has been designed for. We started this project about a year and a half ago, and from the very beginning, we focus on continuous updates and continuous uploads of techniques that are useful to you. Anything from self-defense to sport jiu-jitsu. Anything from individual drills and techniques to the full concepts and lessons from big players like Sophia McDormand, Christian Woodman-C, and Andres Brunowskis. In addition to all this, we feature workshops, seminars, and events that took place at Roll Academy. So you have access to all of this at your fingertips. And recently, due to a large amount of requests, we have opened the opportunity for lifetime memberships. No more cancellation fees, no more reoccurring payments, no more subscriptions. One simple payment, and you have full unlimited access to drills, techniques, full concept lessons, and events from big names in Jiu-Jitsu. How can you beat that? Go to rollacademy.tv, create a free account, take a look what the platform has to offer, and subscribe to continue improving your Jiu-Jitsu. And now, let's get back to Raw Radio.
As a kid, Gianni Grippo had tremendous support from his parents, support that gave him the opportunity to train at one of the most prestigious academies in New York City. There, he was able to take private lessons and train with some of the biggest names in BJJ. However, as a young adult, he began to feel his goals were not being supported in the way he needed, and Gianni made the controversial decision to switch academies. Moving just a few blocks away to another prestigious but competing academy, Gianni continued to train with some of the most respected BJJ Black Belts in the world. But in doing so, he faced severe backlash. Listen as Gianni talks about his amazing family, the incredible dedication it took to become one of the best in the world, and his decision to switch academies. A hugely controversial decision that now, after years of reflection, he would have handled differently. Here is Roll Radio with the extremely dedicated and multi-time world champion, Gianni Grippo.
Welcome to Raw Radio. And we're live. Gary, how are you?
I'm good, sir. How are you?
I heard a rumor
Uh-oh.
that you got permission to order
Yes.
a new judo gi.
Yeah. So if you
What in
listen,
what in the world did you do to deserve this?
I don't know. It's my charming personality, I'm sure. Yeah, if you listen, you might have heard that Margaret, my wife, said I would need a raise in order to get this new gi that I wanted. And no, I got lucky. She said, you get paid on Wednesday. Go ahead and get it. So we don't have to do the GoFundMe. I don't have to reach out to the particular people who we know that work and run that company. I can actually pay for it like a big boy, and hopefully it'll be coming soon.
Listen, we have a special guest in the house, Gianni Grippo. Welcome to the show. How are you, sir?
What's up, man? I'm good. Thank you for having me, guys. I appreciate it.
We appreciate you. Thank you.
Hey, listen, Johnny. When did we meet first time? It's been a while. Like I don't
It's been
even remember.
It's been a long time. I'm trying to think. I know I came to a Chicago Open way back in the day when I was like a purple belt. I'm not sure if that was the time we met. I know we've crossed paths plenty of times. I want to say like probably the first time would have been around then. So that was like 2010, 2011, I believe.
Somewhere. I remember you were a brown belt, but I don't remember exactly where. It's been a while. Well, I'm glad we had the opportunity to sit down with you. Thanks for your time.
Yeah, of course.
What an interesting story of your life. I mean, listen, like I don't even know where to start.
Yeah.
Let's start with the basic one. Like how did all this started? Like why in the world jiu-jitsu, and why did you step on the mat for the very first time?
You know what? I mean, it goes way beyond when I was 10 years old starting to train. It actually, like my upbringing through sports and into jiu-jitsu and martial arts really like started before I was even born. It started with my dad. My dad was a very avid athlete while working full time and having a regular job. He was also serious about his health and about his fitness. And when he was like in his late 30s, early 40s, he had me much later. I still wasn't around at that point. So this was like the late 80s, maybe beginning of the 90s. He did a lot of triathlons. He was a big triathlete. And not even just the regular triathlons. He did like the Ironman Hawaii, the Escape from Alcatraz, all these
Nice.
crazy triathlons that
Those are
I would
crazy
never.
dudes.
Those are crazy dudes.
I mean,
He's one of them.
I,
You
I,
know?
I know a couple, I know a handful of triathletes in my life, and one of our students, my wife is one, and they say the jiu-jitsu guys are crazy. Well, no,
Yeah, they're at
take
a
it to the next level. This is
they're at a different level for sure. My dad would always tell me about like how he wouldn't talk to me so much about the races themselves. Um, those are kind of self-explanatory how crazy they were, but he would tell me about his work ethic and how much time he would put into practice while still, like I said, having a full-time job. He's been a hairstylist since he was 18, 19, 20 maybe. So that's a hard job where you're standing all day. His shoulders are a mess, when you're trying to cut people's hair all day. Also, you have to be you have to engage with the person. You have to be in a good state of mind. And he would work out before, work out after these jobs. So it wasn't always very easy for him, but he always managed to put in the work one way or another and be able to put himself in peak shape to be able to compete at some of the toughest races in the world. So already you can tell that my upbringing was going to be very not regimented. I wouldn't say that, but I would be raised the right way on how to have a strong work ethic, because that came from my dad and from my mom as well, who supported that as well. She wasn't as much of an athlete herself, but she always did tag along with my dad for all these triathlons and all these crazy races that he would do, and she would support him with them. So pretty much she was pretty crazy as well for that. And then eventually I came along, and by that point my dad wasn't doing any races. Maybe he did a few before I could even really remember. But I mean, right around the age of 4 was the time they started getting me into everything from there, and that started kind of like my athlete slash martial arts life.
do you feel like that was pushed onto you? Maybe pushed is a wrong word here, but you know what I mean. Was it kind of self developing, where you just were surrounded by athletic family, and just sports were part of it, or did you feel that you had no other choice, and you just had to do it?
No, I don't feel like I was. I was. I feel like I was very gently pushed into everything. So what I'll say as well is, it's like we didn't. It wasn't like, oh, you're gonna go do jujitsu. They throughout from like the ages of 4 to 10, I did a bunch of different things. And they're kind of like, hey, try this, try that. I think they always wanted me to be an athlete. They wanted me to have a healthy lifestyle, but they didn't have anything in particular that they needed me to do. It was just like, we want you to be healthy. We want you to take care of yourself. We want you to be active. So, choose a sport here. And I was on swim teams when I was a kid. I used to box when I was a kid. I used to do karate. I did all the kind of normal team sports as well growing up. I did Muay Thai and all these different things. And then eventually, I found jujitsu when I was 10. I didn't find it myself, but my dad would hear about it and from all these different people, and he's like, okay, let's try this. And that happened to be what stuck. But yeah, I never felt like I had to do something. They just gave me options, which I appreciate. And some things worked, some things didn't. And then obviously, jiu-jitsu was just the one that I latched onto for whatever reason, that I latched onto the most. And they had no like it like I said, I used to swim on swim teams. You'd think my dad maybe would want me to like kind of go down that triathlete route. I guess growing up, maybe that would be the thing. He even asked me once if I wanted to do it. I was like, no. But that
That was a quick no.
Yeah, you were big in
no.
track too, right?
I ran a little bit in track, and then my first year in high school, I ran cross country, which was like those like 5Ks. I hated that. I actually got hurt doing that more than I did doing jiu-jitsu that one season. Running a lot wasn't for me, but yeah, so it wasn't like I was forced into anything in particular. It was just a nice gentle push into different things, kind of letting me explore different options, and then just kind of jiu-jitsu is what stuck around the longest, obviously.
So what do you think was so appealing about jiu-jitsu that was your selection, and obviously it shaped your most of your life up to this point?
Yeah, it's everything now, which is sometimes kind of scary for me. It is kind of scary, especially when the pandemic hit and there was no competitions and there was no training, if at all. I was able to figure out a little quarantine situation with my roommate, but then we got into too many fights, it didn't work out.
Oh, we got to talk about that. No,
Yeah, we can get into that. We can get into I don't know if he'll like it, but we can get into that for sure. Yeah, what was I saying with that?
What was the
Sorry.
main reason behind jiu-jitsu? Like
Yeah.
what drew you to jiu-jitsu itself?
Yeah. I was 10 years old, so I can't even really say for sure, but maybe it was a mixture of enjoying the martial arts, being a part of that, but not getting hit. Because when I was in boxing, I don't know, I was a pretty good boxer when I was a kid, 8, 9 years old. I would go into these like actual rings. It was like a real legit setup. And I would be really good in training, but then when I would compete, I would freeze. I'd be afraid of getting hit. I was hesitant. Um, so I guess I always had a enjoyment for combat sports, but without the striking involved, maybe, or maybe I like the idea of the gentle art, which I've come to learn doesn't really always feel like the gentle art.
Yeah.
Um,
Gary heard me say on this show, and all together, it is a gentle sport just for the other guy.
Yeah, I've heard.
yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, done properly, only one of you should be enjoying it, I think is what I heard once.
Yeah. Well, I'll even tell you guys, it's funny. I know I'm getting off track, but like these last couple of months during this quarantine time, I've been training with the Meows every day, Paulo and Joao Meow. And for such little guys, man, they go so hard. So I just got back from a session now. I'm feeling like busted lip, ghee burn on my face. It definitely doesn't always feel like the gentle art for sure.
So what made you continue? So you're 10. Let's go through this. Show the timeline. You
Mm-hmm.
have obviously up to years of age of 10. You have quite, athletic lifestyle. Your parents are heavily involved in that, and you start jiu-jitsu. At which point this becomes instead of your parents taking you, you want to go.
Yeah.
Like, at which point this becomes something that you want to do it.
So I would say, and just to give you guys a timeline, I'm kind of telling you I'm bouncing around all these different sports. So just so you know, like I started doing karate at age 4, and I stuck with that, and that kind of went all the way to 10. And there was some basic grappling involved. So even before I joined jiu-jitsu at Henzo Gracie Academy, I was still doing some basic grappling from like probably age of like 7 or 8 to 10 when I eventually went over to Henzo's and focused strictly on jiu-jitsu. During that time, I mixed in boxing, and I mixed in Muay Thai, and I was pretty serious on a swim team for probably like 5 years, like from ages 7 to 12. And like within that time, I found jujitsu, and I kind of alternated between swimming and jujitsu. And I remember even when I first started, my parents every day, one of them would pick me up from school. I'd go to swim practice, and these were like legit swim teams I was on too. Like these kids, the coaches were serious with us. This was like a 6-day a week, 11-month of the year sport. Where it was pretty intense. We had a lot of like meets every weekend. So it was very competitive and serious, even at a young age. And I enjoyed that, but I eventually, after about 2 years or so, I decided to do the one sport. I just getting back to it. My parents would pick me up every day from school. I'd go to swim practice for about 2 hours, and then they'd pick me up again, and then we would drive into the city, into New York. We lived in Jersey, and I would do like an hour private lesson at Henzo's every single day. Drive me during the middle of rush hour getting into New York. So I'd do 2 different sports. I would do my homework, especially when it started getting dark early. I would do my homework in the back seat, down and back from the city. And when it would get dark out, they gave me like a head flashlight so that I could see my homework while I'm doing it as well. Yeah, like a headlight. And yeah, that was like the routine for like 5 or 6 days a week.
And you
which
loving
was fun. I enjoyed it. Yeah, I enjoyed being active. I was also young, so I had all the energy in the world. Nothing really fazed me at that time.
The reason why I'm asking, this sounds kind of crazy. I mean, how old are you at this point? 12, 10?
So I probably had that routine for my first 2 years of training, at least, maybe three.
And how old are you at that point?
I was 10.
10.
About 10? So you're 10
Yeah.
years old, you get up early, you go swim for 2 hours, then you go to a private lessons, which we're gonna get in a second, because you have private lesson
Yeah.
5 days a week. I want to hear that. But
Yeah.
and then you go to school, and then you do homework in your car with a flashlight.
Yeah.
Are you crazy?
Yeah, well, I mean, there was even days. So I was like serious enough about swimming where, say, if I couldn't make the practices after school, I'm not sure exactly why, but there was like optional practices that would go on before school. So the practices would be at like 6 a.m. and there was a couple days a week that I would go to that. Um, and then I remember there was also like, I mean, even when I was a kid at 7 years old, my dad would wake me up for runs in the morning before school. I'd go on a run with either him or my mom. I would come back, I would do push-ups, chin-ups, all this stuff, and then go to school, which was like fourth grade at the time. So yeah, it was pretty regimented pretty early on, and I'm not sure if I was always a fan of that when I was a kid, but it was like kind of like what I grew up knowing, uh, and I understood the benefits of it at the same time too. So I always stuck with it. I always trusted my parents at the same time too.
Yeah, I just told my daughter the story about you running in the morning and seeing if she wanted to do it with me, and she said only if I bought her new shoes. So we'll be getting new shoes.
Gary,
I might have given a response like that too. So I understand.
Yeah,
I,
we'll see
listen,
if she does it.
I'm noticing the pattern here. She's
What's
asking
that?
for shoes. You asking
Right,
for
asking
new
for
judo
gis.
gi. I mean,
Yeah,
what's
I'm
going
easily-
on in your family?
I didn't have a lot as a kid, so now when I get stuff, it's extra special. So
Take advantage of it now.
absolutely, that's right, and I must have passed it along to her.
Johnny,
I don't think she'll be doing pull-ups and push-ups though when we get home from the run.
Johnny, talk to me about these privates, because I know a lot of people. One, they don't want to do private lessons. I'm curious to hear your view on it, and they simply think it's a waste of money, waste of time, and so on. Two, a lot of people don't have opportunity to do a private on a regular basis. You are talking about doing privates every day
Yes.
at Enzo Gracie's.
Yeah. So it was a little different back then than probably it is now. First of all, the prices were much different. Not that it was inexpensive for my parents. If you add up all the privates, I mean, like I said, they come from triathlon, background, so they're a little crazy. Um, but yeah, for me, actually, the privates were mainly my only option because at Henzo's, when I was a kid, there was no kids program. I was the youngest by probably 8 to 10 years in the whole
Oh, no
gym.
kidding.
Yeah, so it was honestly the only thing I could do. I think, well, so let's say we weren't going into the city 6 days a week. I think there was, I would probably go into the city about 4 days a week, and then twice a week there was a gym in Jersey that had a kids program that I would go there instead those 2 days. So we mixed it up a little bit, but still driving into the city during rush hour 4 days a week, and doing privates each time. But I was very fortunate. I had parents who were motivated to push me into something that they could tell that I enjoyed. They were willing to pay, time and money for it. I was just, I obviously was born into a very good situation if I wanted to be an athlete because they're willing to put their time and money into it. Um, yeah,
Was it worth
so I
it?
was just,
I mean, did
it was,
that pay off? I mean, I guess that's the main
yes.
question.
I got one-on-one attention from probably one of the best kids instructors I could have, Magno Gama. He has a Hensel Gracie School in Queens. Um, he was, yeah. If I didn't have him, I don't think I'd be where I am. He definitely was one that shaped me in the beginning of my jiu-jitsu career. I mean, he had full attention on me, like I was getting one-on-one attention. I think privates, if they're approached the right way, are beneficial. If you kind of learn a bunch of random things every day, then maybe it's not going to be so beneficial. But we had a good system. Obviously, we were working like 4 days a week, so there would be he'd have a good curriculum. We weren't doing a million different things. We'd work, a certain sequence and kind of build our way up, throughout the weeks and months and years even. I think that's the way to approach private lessons. I always, even when I teach the private lessons now, sometimes I have to catch people who are like asking me all these different questions. And I mean, that's great. They can do that. I don't want to stop them from asking all these questions. But I always try to like keep it to a certain subject. I'm like, okay, it's cool to learn, you know, 20 different things, but I'd rather you be able to learn maybe two or three things and kind of just focus on that, or else you're really not going to gain all that much if you go over all these different positions. So I had the right coach who helped me. First of all, gave my parents a good price. Also because I was a kid, he gave us a good discount so I could continue to go, pretty often. And obviously I had crazy parents who were willing to pay.
To drive you in.
We should
The money's one
your
thing,
parents
man.
on the
Sitting
show
in the
and
car is
get the
another.
true story.
Yeah. It was a fun time. I enjoyed that. I enjoyed having my parents bring me in, and I think once I was like 13 or 14, then I started going into the city on my own. Maybe 14. Um, but yeah, those first three or so years were just like private lessons. My parents taking me into the city every day. And that was it.
You bring up a very good point about the private lessons, and I'm going to go back to that for a second. It's, I feel like often, I'm curious what you think about this, but I often feel like people think, or students think, that taking one private lessons, they're going to have all of their questions answered, all in that one 45 or 60-minute session, however long it is, doesn't matter. But
Yeah.
I often feel that expectation of, I'm going to ask you all these questions and I'm going to get all of the answers. And you brought up something very, very important, I think, and there's the strategic approach to private lesson or private training. It's, you get the one-on-one attention, but if it's not structured correctly, if there is no thought behind it, if there is no plan of execution, in a longer period of time, these private lessons could very easily turn into a wasted time, essentially.
Yeah.
What I often do is, first time when I meet with a student, I often ask them a lot of questions. And I ask them, what is the plan here? How long are we planning on doing this? What's your commitment behind it? And what are you trying to take away from it? So I can guide you so we can achieve this goal together, versus just throwing random things and bouncing like a ping pong off the walls. Right.
You don't retain anything. I know I do a semi-private with somebody who's at a much higher level than me, and about, 5-6 things in, they're like, do you want to try it? And I'm like, no, I'm good. I'm sticking with those 3 or 4 because I'm not going to retain anything. I'm going to get home. Even if I have notes, I'm not going to be able to follow it. So yeah, I think, sometimes less is more, and, keeping it simple really when you're doing privates is the way to go.
So to be honest, like that's kind of the same way I take it as well. I asked them before the private, like a couple days ahead. I'm like, hey, what is your plan? What is something you really want to focus on? And give me 2 or 3 things tops. I don't want to hear anymore because I don't want to get too far into it. If we continue to do these privates for however long, for weeks or months, then we could start getting into other things. But just for now, this is a short period thing. Let's keep it simple. And it's funny, even for me, like when I take the classes, one of my favorite coaches at Marcelo's is Paul Schreiner. He's very technical, but also sometimes he loves to just show people stuff. He loves to go over a lot. So sometimes there's classes, some of the longer classes, where he'll do a bunch of different sequences. And even for me, who has been like training for 18 years, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do this one, and that's it. I'm like, I'm not gonna. He'll be like, try this and try that. He just loves to tell people to try things. I'm like, no, I'm good with this and that because I'm not going to remember if I do all of the sequences once or twice each. I'd rather do that 1 or 2 sequences, 10 times each. And I feel like I'll understand that better.
Yeah, somebody told me a while back, in order to be a good instructor, it doesn't matter with jiu-jitsu or not, but in order to be a good instructor, you can't overstimulate or understimulate the audience. You have to be right in the middle, somewhere there where you're keeping their attention the entire time, and they are taking value away from this conversation or presentation. The moment you show too much, you're losing them. If you show not enough, there's a million questions and nobody's winning.
Oh, yeah.
So you're going into your teens. You said about 13, 14, somewhere there you start traveling. Obviously jiu-jitsu is becoming more serious. You're independent. You're getting into a city. You're doing your training. Life is, what belt are you in at this point? Give us a perspective experience here.
So like, it's funny. The belts weren't as, not regimented, but like there was no attendance cards or anything like that, or kind of keeping track of how many times you come in. So I got my yellow belt like 2.5, 3 months into training because I'd already done some basic grappling, and I got it from Henzo. Henzo was there himself, and I remember I
Do
didn't
you
know how to
realize who
most.
Henzo is at that point?
I knew who he was. Yeah, I knew who he
Yeah.
was. I don't think I really figured how big of a name he was at that point. This was 2002. I think later on in my life, the more I was there, the more I realized how influential he is. But I got that from him after 2 or 3 months. I'm like, wow, this is going to be quick and easy. I didn't understand. I'm going to be a black belt. I'm going to be a black belt in no time. Because when I was a kid, I did karate, and I got a black belt when I was like 8 years old. That thing's way different.
Yeah. You'd be fun. Go ahead. I'm sorry. You'd be surprised how often that comes up in these conversations.
I'm
Is how
sure.
quick you get it in other disciplines, and how hard it is to get now.
Well, then I really learned it after that, because 3.5 years later, after that yellow belt promotion, I was still a yellow belt. Since I was like still like mostly taking private lessons, I think I was starting to take some regular classes at that time. But at that time, there was really no like attendance record or anything like that. It was very Brazilian style run. Like if you didn't have the monthly pay, they're like, oh, okay, pay when you can. It wasn't as super regimented. So honestly, I think Henzo kind of forgot that I'd been a yellow belt for so long. I think my coach had to be like, hey, Henzo, I think Gianni's, and I was always competing, and I was always doing well at these competitions. And, I was like almost a 14-year-old yellow belt after a while, and killing it, not just like a lousy 14-year-old yellow belt, but pretty good too for my age. So then they got me orange and green. I went to blue pretty fast after those two. But
is Henzo teaching classes at that point?
A little bit more than, yeah. It was when I first went there, it was the main three guys were Henzo, Sean Williams, and John Danaher. Which, when you look at those three now, they're both they're both very popular in their own way. It was the first person I actually saw when I came into Henzo's when I was a kid was John Danaher teaching a private lesson. So some things never change. But yeah, it was basically those three. My coach Magno was under them as like a purple belt, brown belt at that time. So yeah, it was a cool time at Henzo's when it was just exclusively those guys.
Yeah, I remember deviating from all this, but I remember when I met Sean Williams. Oh my God, this is like 17 years ago. For the very first time, I met him in California, and I went to a Jiu Jitsu academy over there. And, as geek as I was, I walk in and there's this guy. I have no idea who he is. I have no clue. I'm clueless. He says, hi, very kind, and this and this and this and that. I come back home and I show everybody, hey, this is where I trained. And I was like, oh, that's Sean Williams. Who's Sean Williams? I have no clue who Sean Williams is. Then I found out who Sean Williams is. I messaged him back. What a kind person. We had a conversation.
Yeah, super cool.
I went back and he welcomed me, but he made fun of me, of course. But I hopefully he doesn't remember any of this. But what a kind person, man. Sean is a guy.
Yeah, he was always really cool with me. Everyone was always really nice with me. I think I remember the old days at Henzo's when I was a kid. I appreciated that time because it was like having like a lot of like older brothers there. A lot of guys like to look out and take care of me, being like the kid in the place, including Sean Williams, including John. Henzo took a liking to me as a kid. They saw my dedication, my parents' dedication. So I had a lot of good backing at that gym at that time. So it was really nice then.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously you continue competing, life is good, any obstacles, anything doesn't go well. I'm sorry, Johnny, but everything you tell me is like life is good. What are you complaining about? I mean,
no, I had nothing to complain about.
It didn't sound like he was complaining one bit.
No, I was very fortunate, like I don't want to say like I want to say that when I I know we'll get into it later, but like when I left Henzo's, I'd always read these forums, and I kind of got into it too much. People like, Gianni left something that everything was handed to him. Everything was everything was given to him. Why would he just leave that? No, like my parents and I, put time into it. I would commute into the city every day once I was old enough to be there. We paid to be there. We took, so I won't say that everything was handed to us. It wasn't always easy. My parents um, put in the time and money and the effort to get me there. I put in the time and effort to be there and put everything into my training. And I was always very serious about training. That was one thing that, like, you could see from me from even early on. I wasn't the kid to play around much. I was there to work and get better. And I don't even know how that happened. I was just a very serious kid. You couldn't really mess with me too much. Not that I was a little prick or anything like that, but I was business on the mat, and that's still how it is today. To the point where sometimes I'm not the most um, fun person to be around during work time. In between, I'm fine, but during that time I was on the mat, I was always very serious about it. Um, and I forget what we were talking about
Well,
there.
before we get to the fork in the road or the big decision of changing teams, because that's a big reason of this conversation. Talk to me. So you compete quite a bit as a teen, right? I mean, obviously,
Hmm.
competition is a huge focus of your entire jiu-jitsu career, your entire jiu-jitsu journey. I'm curious at which point you start noticing this factor of winning and losing. And that often comes up, especially when you talk to kids or parents, not kids, parents, right? The drive to win is important, but at the same time, there's this very thin line where it's too much, not enough, and losing is not so pleasant, and kids give up. I'm curious what your perspective was and is today on this. Like, at which point, are you winning all the time? Is it like,
No, no, I mean, I definitely won way more than I lost. I was always good as a kid. I competed well at all the like. No, I always used to go to all the local Naga and Grapplers Quest tournaments. My dad and my mom would fly me like to all these different events out in Florida. I remember we'd go to Atlanta, Vegas, Chicago. I don't know if we ever went to California, but like we would travel to wherever they were because that's what was happening at that time. And I won a good amount, but I definitely lost a few as well. And yeah, I think I was able to overcome losing well because I experienced it enough. I think sometimes you see a lot of high level guys nowadays who had a very, kind of not easy path. I don't think it's very easy for anyone going up in the ranks, but there's some guys who just you see they don't have any losses. They're extremely talented, naturally gifted, whatever it may be, hard workers. And then they maybe later on in their career all of a sudden have a few losses and they don't know how to come back from that. So I think one thing for me, and I don't know if I'm even answering your question right, but I think I was always able to handle losses both back then and now because I had my fair share of them, so I was kind of immune to them by kind of having to go through them every once in a while. I didn't handle them well as a kid. Oh man, I was really bad. I remember a couple times I'd throw my mouthpiece, or I'd have a little tantrum, or I'd cry. I was definitely like, I remember one guy now, what's his name? Elliot Marshall. I think he was a former UFC guy. He's very nice to me now, but I think he was my referee once when I was a kid, and I yelled at him or something when I was like 11 or 12 or something. I was like, "What was that? That was a bad call," And he's like, "Hey, little man, watch your mouth," or something like that. I wasn't really a lot of fun to be around, um, but over time, I learned how to handle it better.
Can I ask you, with super competitive parents and with the team you were under, those guys, how did they handle that when you would act like that?
Oh, they wouldn't like it. They wouldn't
Okay.
like it. I don't know if they ever. Probably one thing that I would do better that maybe my parents didn't do as well. They didn't reprimand me enough. They weren't as hard on me, so it probably took me longer to figure out that that wasn't a good way to be. Sorry, my parents are listening to this for calling them out, but I do find it to be true that
like I said
some
before, we'll get your parents on the show. We'll get
yes,
the
Yeah.
story behind all of
but
this.
sometimes I still have those tendencies where I have to watch myself, and maybe if they reprimanded me more for how I would act in those situations, I would have caught on to that faster. But it took me some time to figure out that that's not the way to be. My coaches wouldn't like it either, and I wouldn't say this was every time, but definitely I would have like some outbursts.
Well, I mean, let's be honest. Losing sucks. I mean,
It sucks. Yeah, I
nobody
don't
wants
take
to
it
beat on
well.
the bitch. Nobody wants to lose, right? But we
Yeah.
do, because there's always only one winner. That's how I look at it. You got 100 people in the room. There's only one out of all of us that's going to win. That's it. The rest of us are losers. That's, the whole, don't even start me on the whole participation ribbon thing, because that just gets me all worked up. But I think there's a lot of pressure today to put on kids and even on adults on being undefeated, winning, and doing great, and achieving all the goals and all that. And what I'm hearing from you, at least, is that losing is actually a good thing. It builds the character. It allows you to find the other side of the story. And more importantly, what I at least tell my kids and my students is that losing is that factor that allows you to get better. It's not winning that makes you better. It's
what are you going to learn
losing that makes you better, because you can make adjustments. You can get better at it.
Yeah. So I got a quick story, and you look at it now in the grand scheme of things, it's such a little thing. It was, in these small high school gymnasiums, at these Naga tournaments that were just in the beginning, and it's nothing compared to like the tournaments that I'll be in now, or the rivalries or matches I would have today. But I remember there was one kid when I first started competing seriously who would like always beat me, and I remember the first time I fought him, he beat me really bad, tapped me real fast, and then like slowly but surely, like as I was training at Henzo's more, I was doing better. The matches were getting closer, and I remember one that came down to the wire. I forgot what happened. It was so many years ago, but I remember I lost, and I wasn't like mad. I didn't throw a tantrum, but I was like crying. I was upset, and I remember my coach coming up to me afterwards. He's like, "All right, we're gonna figure this shit out. We're gonna figure this out. We're gonna beat this guy." And it felt so good, because that was like a motivator to get better, to go to the. I remember the next day we were so excited to work and go over things, and so that kind of that right there. And then the next time we won, which is great.
There you go.
Pays off.
Yeah,
It pays off.
But it pays off. But having those, you're forced to learn. You're forced to improve. It's a very easy tendency when you win all the time to not really reflect on what went wrong, and you never really improve from that. You're like, hey, it worked. So what do I need to build upon? And those same things happen today, like competing against the Mia brothers so many times. Losing all those times forced me to learn, forced me to get better until I could eventually win those matches against those guys, or against one. I can't say, it's funny. I want to say beating both, but I only beat one, but it feels like beating both. But like those beginning days helped me deal with losses and setbacks in the right way, and look at them as an opportunity to build rather than question myself as much.
Well, and there's the other factor behind all of this, that being on top and being undefeated or winning all the time, it gives us the false sense of being the best. And first of all, we become bigger target. People actually look at us, what we do, our habits, how they pick us apart, pick our game apart, and then they analyze and develop game to beat us, right? That's what essentially what you're talking about right now, right? Mm-hmm. But the second thing is, we are not driving and pushing to improve and get better, because we have this sense of comfort, and then all of this kind of becomes to, it is what it is. Everybody loses, or most lose at some point or another, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I also just want to make it known as well that my parents were never really emphasizing results as well. They were emphasizing, performance, like putting yourself out there, doing the best you can, and just kind of letting the results be what they may. Sometimes you can't really control the results as well. So I from what I always remember, I was never really reprimanded, or my parents were never really disappointed on the results. They never got after me about that. They would more get after me about effort and about enthusiasm for being out there, and making sure that I'm giving my all and putting my best foot forward, rather than how the results would go.
Well, good for you. I mean, that's attitude that you want from coaches and your parents and your supportive network. The end result is not always reflective of your hard work, and vice versa. It's, what happens when you on the path to get there, and I'm pretty confident that if you work hard, the results are pretty visible. So you get to this pivot point. This is what we really want to talk about, the meat and potatoes. Okay. This is the life lessons, right? So you get to this pivot point, and I know you haven't talked about this a lot, and I'm really glad that you're willing to tell us the story, because you're about to make a huge decision in your life.
Mhm.
How's
Yeah.
this unfolding?
I think I started thinking about it when I was like a purple belt, because at Henzo's there became a period of time where most of the main instructors were focusing on MMA. A lot of the Brazilian instructors like Gregor Gracie, Igor Gracie, Halls, they were all like involved in MMA in some way. John Donaher, like one of the main coaches that I would go to at this point. Once I got older, I started gravitating more towards his classes, and I even took a few privates with him for like once a week for a couple of years, which was great. But even he was more dedicated towards MMA at the time, with Georges St. Pierre there, Frankie Edgar, and Chris Weidman would come in as well, amongst other names. Um, so I felt like a lot of the pure jiu-jitsu that I was focusing on, there wasn't so much attention on it, and Henzo wasn't in as much at this point. And I felt like, so at the end of my purple belt and brown belt, and the beginning of my brown belt time, I started running competition classes at Henzo's. And I would like message everyone from all of Henzo affiliate schools and tell people to come in and train. And, we'd have like these epic training sessions. I realized they were way too long now. They were like 3 hours long. These guys they must have hated me. I'm like, okay, guys, we're going to drill for 50 minutes. Give me the opportunity to run a training session and I'll bury people. But, they were intense. But I also was like thinking, like, I don't want to be doing this on my own. I don't want to be uh, feeling like I have to lead myself. I was very self motivated. I felt like I could, but I felt like I could make it work. But I was like, how far could I go once I get to high level brown belt, black belt competition? I remember even asking a friend there who was like one of the coaches there, and he gave me I don't even know if he said it. I asked him like, how do you think I would do a black belt if I was here? And he's like, I don't know. I'm like, you're telling me this. You're a diehard Henzo guy, and you're telling me you don't know. So that kind of got me thinking a lot. And I mean, I actually did well my first year at Brown. I won Pans at Henzo's. I was winning a bunch of tournaments. I think I took second at Worlds on a very close call where it could have went my way, but it didn't. So I took second my first year. Um, but I just felt like I wanted a guidance from someone who had been at the highest level in IBJJF and have other people around me that also had similar goals. And honestly, at that time, there was no Gordon, there was barely any Gary at that point. I used to train with Gary Tonin a lot in the gi, which was fun. He is as fun to train with as he is to watch competing, because the rounds were always just super entertaining. They were all over the place. They were cool. There was no Eddie Cummings at the time. There was none of these down in her death squad. They came like shortly after me. So there was really no one else that was really competition motivated. The people that would come to Henzo's and compete was because they would come to my competition classes and get motivated to compete. But there really wasn't like many people my age, 20, 21, that were motivated to compete. So I felt like I wanted to have like-minded people. And that was what I stopped by at Marcelo's once just to check it out. I liked the vibe. I liked that there was a lot of guys my age around my rank, similar goals. And then at the highest, the leader of the gym had won everything that I wanted to win, had been everywhere that I wanted to be. And I felt like that was someone that I wanted to be under. So I made that switch.
But
Yeah.
So let me stop you for a second. So, I mean, everybody who's listening to it right now, at least I'm listening to it right now, and I know this story. So, but I'm listening to you right now, and like I'm thinking, like you are crazy, like you are under you training with Henzo Gracie, you training with one of the best places there can be, arguably, in the world. There's the best guys of the best guys are literally in the same room with you, and you drop names one after the other. And yet you thinking the grass is green on the other side.
Yep.
Is it grass is greener, or is it just because it's different? Do you know what I mean?
So the names that I'm dropping there as well, like I said, they just all had different goals.
Right.
And I felt
that's what I mean.
So I had amazing names in the gym, but like I said, even the times Gary was only showing up for my competition classes, and I don't know what he was really doing at that time. He wasn't a big name, and he was coming into Henzo's once or twice a week at the time. He wasn't. I don't think I kind of forced him into the gi. I feel like I don't think he ever really liked it that much. So there wasn't really like just. Of course, there were so many good MMA guys coming in there, but that wasn't helping me towards my goal. Doing rounds with Frank Yeager, which I barely ever did as well. I would stay on the outside and train with jiu-jitsu guys, but there really wasn't just that focus on the competition guys, on like pure jiu-jitsu competition. And I just felt like I wanted that. Like Marcelo's not slogan, but like one of their first t-shirts they had was like Sport Jiu-Jitsu, Marcelo Garcia Academy. Like they have one distinct thing. I think like I always liked the idea of having a gym where it's just one singular focus, kind of like doing that one private, having a kind of a singular focus on an objective. Henzo's is great, and this is how they do so well financially, is because they have the boxing program, they have their MMA program, they have their jiu-jitsu program, they even have they probably don't still have it, but they had a capoeira program, and that's all great, but only a small part of that is what was the most important to me. So it was really difficult, but I just felt like, I was going into a school that had a lot less names at the time. Like all these guys, where we had like our Marcelo Garcia brown belt dream team and all these really good guys. But when I got there, some of them weren't there. The others were just purple belts. It was basically Marcelo and Paul Schreiner and Bernardo Furia as the only black belts there, and they're the instructors. So it wasn't like I was going into a big school, but it was a much smaller school, but it was very singularly focused, which is something that I really gravitated towards.
So what's going through your mind with all of this? I mean, I don't have to point this out, but changing teams at that time, especially from Henzo's to Marcelo's, I mean, a lot of people view them as rivalries in a way, and they compete against each other, right? I mean,
and they're also 4 city blocks away from each other,
and they are right next to each other.
Huh?
Oh yeah, they are right down the street. Yeah, they're right down the street.
Well, actually, it's funny. Like I always had to cross Enzo's to get to Marcelo's like the first year or so, until I moved somewhere else. And I remember I'd always cross paths with the wrong people, like the people that didn't like me. Like about 90% of the people at Henzo's like were all cool, but I would always run into like the 10% that didn't like me so much. So that was uncomfortable.
That always creates interesting morning.
Yeah.
And obviously switching teams often, even to this day, is frowned upon. It is. What's going through your mind? Where's your head at that point? What are you doing? I mean, clearly there is different interest. Your goals are slightly different. Technically, there's nothing wrong with that, right?
So
but how do you make them move?
I think my intentions were good, but my approach was poor, and that was being like, 20-year-old idiot. No excuse for, I think I was mature enough at 20 to know what a good decision and bad decision. I think I made the right decision, but the approach could have been much better. So I remember I was going to a Chicago Open with my friend, and I didn't want to tell him before the tournament, but I was already set on leaving. And I wanted to tell him after tournament because I wanted him to coach me and not hate me on the trip.
Strategic approach.
So then anyways, I win my weight class and I'm going to stick around for the Open. And I remember I got upset because him and one of my coaches that were there left to go to something. They went to a dinner or something like that. I felt kind of abandoned because there was no one else there. So my approach completely changed. Instead of, telling everybody what was going on, telling everybody what I was going to do, I kind of just was like, you what? F you all, I'm out of here, because I was pissed off about that moment. Mm-hmm. One little moment, and I was that changed my approach. So I basically went to Marcelo's that Monday and just started training there, maybe messaged a few people, and that was pretty much it. Which was, at first, I remember when I was getting a lot of backlash for it, I was like, oh, you guys don't understand, blah, blah, blah. But now when I look at it almost 7.5 years later, I'm like, I understand now. I get it.
So what do you understand? What
I understand that while I felt like I wasn't always the focus of attention, the jiu-jitsu wasn't the focus of attention all the time, there were a lot of people there that did care for me. Maybe I didn't see it all the time, but there were a lot of people that were invested in my improvement. But maybe they played like more of a background role. Maybe it was a lot of training partners, and stuff like that. But I didn't take them into consideration. I kind of considered how I was feeling, where my emotional state was at, and I didn't take enough time to tell people what my ideas were, what my reasonings were. I wish I did that, because I think for the first couple of years I left and people didn't really understand the reasons why. I could have told them. I think if you, I don't think there's anything wrong with changing teams, because you got to go where you're happy. I remember there was a period of time I wasn't super happy there either. So you got to go where you're happy. You got to go where you're enjoying. I remember as soon as I got to Marcel's, I felt comfortable. I felt home. I felt great. So I never, want to put people down from changing teams. It's just a matter of how you change it. I think it's important to go to your coach, tell them your reasonings, explain yourself, and whether they like it or not, at least you kind of explained yourself first. I think it's always important for them to hear it from you first, rather than find out from someone else that you left or something like that. It's always much better for you to come right up to them and explain yourself, or explain what your thoughts are, rather than just kind of randomly disappearing.
So why didn't you? Why didn't you reach out? Why didn't you go and talk to your coaches?
Immaturity, just pure immaturity. Just pure not thinking things through, kind of taking things overly emotionally, taking myself too seriously. Just kind of being like, oh, these guys didn't show up for my open weight, which I wasn't going to win anyway. I was a featherweight. They probably knew that. So I just was upset one day about how I felt abandoned, and I took that one moment into a big decision, and that didn't portray me very well at that point.
The
And
decision
now
was
now
already
and now
made.
I learned that
The decision
was already made.
right?
The decision was already made. I knew what my plan was, but obviously, like I said, the approach was massively screwed up.
Have you ever thought about the fact that what would happen if, in a very hypothetical way, what if you brought up this topic a year earlier, or had these conversations before you made the decision? Do you think that anything would change?
Yeah, I think they will.
Or like, I mean, obviously this is a hypothetical. We won't know the true answers, but I'm curious, have you ever thought about that? Like, have you ever reflected on it to the point of, was this truly a good decision?
Yeah. Oh, for me, yes, I think it was. I think, not even for competition or anything like that. It was just, Marcelo's is a place that I enjoy being. People I'm around, I really enjoy being around. There was an environment as well at Henzo's that I wasn't always a fan of. And so it wasn't just purely based on competition as well. I don't want to leave it at that. There was also personality based. There was environment based, reasons that I left as well. I don't want to just say I'm purely just the competitor person. There was also like happiness issues that I felt like I needed to work on.
I mean, listen, every academy, every gym, every club, they have a dynamic of culture. It's a small community, and people interact within that community in a certain way. And often that's driven by the leadership, but not always. And whether one fits into that community or not, it's a big factor whether they enjoy it or not, right? And
yeah.
I at least at my academy, I often say this is place not for everybody. This is not one cookie cutter place. This, we target specific people with a specific interest, and if you like what we do, then you're welcome to come and enjoy it. We love it, right? But it's not for everybody. And I think that kind of fits into every place. One places are heavy competition, the other places are self-defense, and ones are with loud music, the other ones are no music. And I don't think there's necessarily a judgment behind each of them. They all do what they love to do, just in a different way. Yeah. And finding a place that fits you is the most important part. I think what you're talking about in a big way here is the way how you make that change. And there's a lot of students out there who contemplate that. Is this place for me? I don't like what they do. Maybe there's a better place somewhere else. And, what would you tell them how would you suggest they approach this situation if they have the thoughts of maybe leaving one gym and going to the other, and, making this one politically correct, but two, also not burning bridges, because I think that's what sucks the most
Yeah.
about, right? I mean, you had
It,
friends, and I'm sure that was
mhm.
impacted.
Yeah, and it hurt a lot too as well. I remember getting a lot of negative messages from people that I came up with when I was a kid at 10 years old, and I was very disappointed. And at that time, I was hurt because I felt like I was being wronged. But then I look at it now, I'm like, now I understand like why they were hurt by it and why they would maybe say negative things. I had some of the negative things I think were a little much, but I do understand why guys were upset at the same time too. So I would always just tell people now is just to be open. Tell them how you're feeling. Tell them what you feel like could be, what don't you like about the gym? What are you looking for? Um, and regardless of how they respond, I think it's at least important to be open.
Mhm.
Um, I'll even say like over the years, I've had tensions with people at every gym I've been at Marcelo's, at Henzo's, and always the way they've been best resolved is to be open with them and like just have open dialogue. There was a couple of guys at Marcelo's that I didn't talk to for a year, and we just like stare at each other and be like, "I don't like you, I don't like you." But and then all of a sudden one day, I just was like, "You know what? I'm just gonna talk to them." I'm just gonna. And sometimes we weren't even talking about what the actual issue was, but just starting conversation.
Mhm.
Or sometimes it was talking about the issue and just kind of being like, "Hey, I don't like what you did here this day. What was that about?" And as soon as we did that, 5 minutes later, of maybe a little uncomfortableness, we were cool, and we were fine. And I think that's just such an important thing to do. It's so much healthier when you just internalize all this tension or things that are bothering you, and you just all of a sudden make rash decisions. You're just going to make things worse. So whether it's dynamics at the gym or you're thinking about going somewhere else, it's just important to be open about how you feel about certain things, what your thoughts are. Um, because maybe coaches could take it into consideration so they can improve an aspect of the gym. That helps them. That
Hmm.
can only help them. If they don't like it, well, they don't like it. But it could also help them too. And I'm sure they would appreciate that as well. Um,
They might not
so
be
yeah,
not they might not even be aware that
yeah,
some of those situations are occurring.
yeah,
I mean, they
yeah,
might
yeah,
do things completely, unintentionally. I mean, this is, yes,
Yeah.
often it's such a silly topic, in my opinion. And these are serious situations. Don't take me wrong, but sometimes it could be resolved in such an easy way by simply
so
talking
easy.
to people. Just talk. Don't text. Talk. Talk. Talk to people. Oh,
Yeah, absolutely.
Gary, you wanted to say something, and I cut you off.
I don't know. It was a while ago. But I think I think if we carried that over a little bit outside the gym too, we'd be in a much better place. Keep
Oh
talking to
yeah,
people about things. And the gyms, like you said, they do have their own cultures. They have their own dynamics. I know when I was looking for a place to start, I reached out to people who trained at different places, and they pointed me in the right direction with the caveat of, these guys here, it's sink or swim, or these guys over here, if you're a beginner, they're going to help him out more, and I think that, if we all took that attitude, everybody probably find their happier place a little bit sooner, maybe not making these decisions or have to make them, split second or with, any negativity coming after it. So yeah, just be open, man. Talk to each other, right? We know people that train at super high level places, where you would think that they shouldn't be crossing over, but they're allowed to because they're open, and they let the owners and instructors know, hey, I want to learn here for these reasons, and I want to go, down the road and learn some no-gi stuff from somebody else for these reasons. And because they're open about it, everybody's cool with it. So
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, recently we had Steve Cohen on our show, and he talked about Olympic medalist and Olympic coach, and he talked about every instructor, every coach has its limitations, and it's important to understand that people might need more than you can provide. It's just that conversation. to take place, to understand what they need and how I can help you, and what I need and how you can help me is very, very important, because then we can start establishing this process similar to privates that we talked about earlier, right? Develop a plan of action, develop the goal, and how are we going to get there as a team, as a collaborative effort, and if so it happens that it doesn't work, that I can't help you, then you know what? Maybe this is not the place for you. And that's okay too. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just
Yeah.
that conversation. I wish people talk more. I wish they did.
Yeah.
I really do.
I wish I talked more about 7 years ago. But it's okay. We learn.
But
It
listen,
worked out.
but listen,
It worked out.
all reality of things, this is what shaped you for who you are today. Okay.
Yeah.
So like I look at this, things happen for a reason. If that event didn't occur, if you didn't make the tough decision, you wouldn't be who you are today. You will be somebody else. And maybe you wouldn't be as good as you are. I mean, you will be different. That's the bottom line. What did your parents
It's like
think about all this?
they understood. I don't know if they just blindly supported their son, um, or they understood. I think they understood my reasonings as well. Obviously, I talked to them about it, so they were for it. But at the same time, they were also going to be for what I felt was best for me. You know. Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
you weren't a little kid anymore. I mean, you're 20 years old, so
Yeah.
it's a big difference.
Do you keep in touch with anybody at Hanzo's?
Yeah, I'm good with, like I said, probably about 90% of the people there, and I think I've explained myself on numerous occasions to a lot of them, so they understand now, which is good. I'm even like, I'm always in touch, or not always, but I'm in touch with like my first coach, Magno, who is, still at Henzo, still runs a Henzo affiliate school. I explained to him my reasons. We've still been trying to find ways to meet up and hang out, but yeah. So overall, it's mostly good.
Good. Well, I'm glad to hear that, because those burned relationships, those hurt relationships are always what suffers the most, and that's the
Yeah.
unfortunate part behind situations like this. So good for you. I'm glad you're moving on from this. I'm glad you found a great place. You're doing amazing things all together. And how are you doing this right now? I mean, life is good.
Yeah, I mean, life isn't so bad. I just moved this past weekend. I'm in Hoboken, New Jersey, and I just moved a couple blocks away. I pretty much haven't left this area during the whole quarantine period. Besides besides going to Florida for Pans and
Hmm.
Houston for a fight to win, I've pretty much been here the whole time. And kind of that self motivation I always had. I just try to find a way to make things work. So during this time, like when it first started, I was like, all right, I don't know what to do. I guess I'm not training for a couple of weeks. But then a couple of weeks go by. I always worked out. Like I found ways to work out in my living room. I always did something, um, like twice a day. Tried to always mimic the training schedule that I would have. I found like these crazy stairs in town, and I was going up and down the stairs like every day, like a madman, because I was just eating so bad I had to do something. And then after a couple weeks or months go by, or a couple weeks, I tried training with my roommate in my living room, and that
Weird how
didn't
that
work
went.
because he's like an older former college wrestler, D1 wrestler, and I think he gets frustrated when a smaller guy beats him up. You know, he's like more the hobbyist type. But the worst thing we did is we were training. I didn't think we were training so seriously, but one day I did pull a dirty move on him. Like he's very rough. He does everything rough. Like hits you, without really knowing it. To defend the Berimbolo, he'll just like, do one of these chokes on you. It's
He's a
nothing he
wrestler.
does is he's a wrestler. Yeah, nothing he does is ever light. So
Of
I remember one
wrestlers.
round. I guess like I guess I must have like subconsciously been like, all right, screw it. If you're gonna be like this, I took 3 slaps to the head in like a round and a half. And I remember he was holding onto my collar, and I just like grabbed his elbow or his tricep elbow, and I just pulled that in and wrist locked him.
Yes,
And like,
yes,
oh,
yes.
As Gary, that's my favorite.
he he was so mad about that. He's like, "Hey, what the hell was that?
Mhm.
That was bullshit." I was like, "Hey,
What?
sorry." Well, he's like, "We're just doing light," and I'm like, "I didn't know we were just doing light, not by those hits." So
Yeah.
I mean, just that dynamic didn't work. I'm very fortunate. A friend of mine who's a black belt in Marcelo owns a UFC gym literally 5 blocks from my old place now, about like a 10-minute walk from where I am now. And I started like developing a small group of people that I trusted, that were like not doing anything reckless. And I started, setting up training sessions on my own twice a week. And it started building up a little bit to the point where I had to tell people like, hey, I can't have too many people on the mat, but now we'll have about like, 10 to 12 people on the mat twice a day. And it's getting seriously competitive in there. It's like it's me, the meows.
Am I hearing that Gianni Grippo Academy is open soon?
This time makes me think, this time makes me think a lot, about what I want to do with that, because I realize I like being able to lead a program. I like being able to run practice. It's been a great dynamic. So, I mean, every day we have kind of like three sessions for the day. We train from 10 a.m. to like 11:30, and then about 11:30 to 12:15, Paulo Meow will run drills, and then we come back at like 7 at night, and then we train again. And sometimes we'll have people that come from work that couldn't make the morning session and train at night. It's nice to run a program, and I think I almost realized at this point not to say that I don't like having someone guiding me, but now I'm at the point where I've been training for 18 years where I know what I need to do to be prepared for something. I don't need to be. I've never had to be told by someone to train more. It's never been an issue of mine. So it has been something I've enjoyed, kind of like running a program, being able to make the training the way I want to as well. Like today we did like a lot of just straight rounds, but then at the end we did a lot of situational training, where it's like 3 minutes left, the person on the bottom is down by a point. And I wish I got that video set. I wish I got a video of that session, because like me and the meows going, it was nuts. It was a lot of fun. But it's fun to be able to mix the training up and kind of do it the way I want. Whereas maybe sometimes when someone else is running the practice, it's not always the same. So it's kind of nice to have that control. And so maybe not too far down the road, something will happen.
Yeah, that
Cool.
would be great. That would be great to see you succeed in that format. So
yeah,
that introduces headaches of its own. Then you got to deal with people like Gary.
What do you mean? It's easy to run.
My day.
It's easy to run your own place, isn't it? You just.
I'm sure there's other issues. There's issues in anything you do.
That's right.
Absolutely. And that's the way to look at it. Listen, there's always obstacles, right? How do we get to the goal? That's the question. Gianni, what a beautiful story. I love it. Thank you for sharing all this. Before we wrap this up, we didn't tell you this, but we do this every episode. We have 5 questions for you. Gary's going to ask you 5 questions. You don't know what they are. They are pretty simple. Some of them are silly, some of them not, but we want you to answer the first thing that comes to your mind. Always generates a good conversation at the end of the episode. Gary?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, here we go. So number 1, what was it like the first time you stepped on the mat?
Scary.
Yeah.
Scary. Yeah. I mean, especially as a kid with a bunch of adults, it was scary the first time. So nothing came natural in the beginning.
Yeah, I could imagine, man, being a kid and going out there with the adults. It's got to be a little intimidating, to say the least. All right. What was your most rewarding achievement?
I would probably say winning Kasai in New York City, overcoming my biggest rival with Paulo, and also being able to do it in front of a home crowd, in a building that used to host the church that I go to. So it was a great setup. And the next day I went to church there, and I'm like, no one understands what I did here last night.
Oh, that's funny. That's great.
So that was pretty cool. That was really cool.
That's awesome.
That is a great story. All right. Have you ever wanted to quit?
No.
All right.
I think maybe no.
Nice.
I don't know.
That's pretty.
Wait a minute. You do 2-hour swimming sessions. You go training jiu-jitsu. You sit in the car. You do homework in the car with a flashlight. You don't want to quit?
I enjoyed it, actually. I think
You're
I was
crazy,
trying to.
dude.
The only reason why I hesitated on it, because I remember an old story when I was a kid. I think I trained like lackadaisically for like a couple days or so, and my parents were like, "Gianni, what are you doing? Don't slack off." They were ready to pull me out. They're like, "Oh, we're not gonna let you train if you just BS it."
Mhm.
So I for a second I was thinking, was it me that wanted to quit, or was it was them that wanted? They were gonna threaten to stop the classes,
Yeah.
So no, I never wanted to quit.
Yeah, my daughter, when she's slacking, and I'll threaten her with, all right, then it's not a threat. It's like, all right, well, if you don't want to go anymore, you can.
Yeah.
yeah, you can quit. And immediately she's like, no, we'll go. Let's go.
That's
And she'll
scary
go
when
grab
they
her
say
stuff.
that. Just know,
Right.
like, just keep in mind. I remember that I was fearful. I enjoyed it. I didn't
Yeah.
want to. That was the worst kind of punishment at that time.
Yeah, she's not. She doesn't compete or anything, but I mean, she goes as hard. She's a little kid, so she goes hard when
Yeah,
she
it's
needs
awesome.
to. All right, where were we? Describe the feelings when you received your black belt.
Oh, I saw that video.
Oh, that was a whirlwind. Crazy. I don't know.
I
I can't. Yeah,
he
that one
pulled a
was.
he pulled a quick one on you. I remember
So
I
that
that
one was
video.
that one was really good. Marcelo is very good at pulling those pranks. He did it for like the
So
next
explain
couple
to everybody what happened, because just quickly explain, because some might have not seen. I don't think even Gary knows about
No,
this.
I missed this. I didn't see it.
Yeah. You gotta check it out afterwards. It's got a lot of views too, which I will say
Yeah.
it's pretty good. But Marcelo comes out, and I'd been there for about 10 months or so. I had won Worlds at Brown, but I hadn't really been there super long to get my black belt. And Marcelo was very stingy on giving out black belts at that time. It was very hard to get one from him. And I remember he comes out with he's like, I had to go to the back to get something. I'm like, ooh, what's going on? So he comes out with this brown belt with 4 stripes. He's like, guys, he hasn't been here for very long, but he deserves this. Gianni, I'm like, BS, I don't want this. I'm like, I'd just rather keep my belt. Just give me 4 stripes. And he's like, oh, turn around so I can tie it around your waist. And then he pulls out a black belt behind me.
Nice.
And the people on the outside are the first ones to notice it. So they're all going crazy. And I'm like, oh, wow, what the hell? So it was really cool. It was kind of a whirlwind experience. And that was the first time he pulled one of those pranks. He did them a lot more after, but I still say mine was the best because it was like the first one he did. Everyone kind of started becoming aware that, like,
it might happen.
Something might happen because he liked to do it. So it wasn't, I really got the first taste of his sneakiness.
Yeah. Well, that was an emotional moment, wasn't it?
It was because it was something that I wanted at that time. It was something I felt like I was ready for. And also it's just so many years at that point and doing it too. I think I'd been training for about 11 years at that point. It was my life. There was nothing else at that point. So it was very significant.
Great. That's a great story. All right, here we go. Last one. Do you wash your belt?
Most of the time, yes. I will admit sometimes I don't. But I will say most of the time when I wash it is on days where I have really bad days of training. And that silly superstition where it's like, oh, you lose everything you learn when you. I forgot that once. My mom washed my belt for me once. I used to follow that, but as I got older, I forgot about it. But most of the time, the days I wash the belt are like the days where I had a really bad training. I'm like, I want to forget today. I want.
So
let's just let this day go.
That's a good way to look at it. All right, there we go. We've got the 5. I think we're 3 over on the wash now. So we're headed.
Gary's keeping a tally of.
I do keep a
washing
tally.
the belt or who doesn't. So
yeah,
and we're headed back in the right direction. No, you're a yes. You said yes.
Oh, yeah.
Look at that. Gianni, again, thank you for being here. Thank you for spending this time with us, sharing your story. I'm really hoping that a lot of people will listen and actually take some tangible lessons from you sharing what you've gone through in your life and some of these tough decisions that you've made. I've been a big fan of yours for years now. I'm looking forward to seeing what the next year, not necessarily this year, but next year will bring. And, if you're ever in Chicago, which I know you do visit, make sure you let us know. Roll Academy is open to you. Come on by. We'll do a seminar, workshop, class. We'll train, whatever the case might be. And hopefully we'll see you soon.
Awesome, man. No, thank you guys for having me. This was a lot of fun. Good chat with you guys.
Oh, man, it was great. So thank you very much, and peace. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks, man.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you for listening to Raw Radio. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to leave us a review and help us make the show even more amazing. For future episodes, check out our website and follow us on all major podcast platforms. Take care.